Lone woodsman bought for $2 a girl with a hood on her head, at sale, weds her when she speaks name. Oregon Hills, spring of 1869. A dust-caked station along the Oregon Road. The smell of cedar, horse grease, and leaf smoke drifts thick in the wind. Around the rough auction stand, nothing more than planks fixed to cargo bins, a group of men forms. Hard palms, cold stares, starving hearts and vacant souls. The sort of spot where even honor fails to pause. A man with a worn blue vest and pitted deputy star strikes a timber mallet onto the beam. "All right, final one for today," he shouts. "She has got no name, has not revealed her face, hood over the crown since Missouri. Claims she can toil, claims she'll submit. First offer, $2. Who's hardy or drunk enough to wed the riddle?" Scorn erupts like a lash. "Perhaps she's a crone under that cloth," one man yells. "Or a stiff," says another. "Might as well wed the damn burlap." A few men spit into the mud and walk away. Others linger to watch, poking each other, hoping for someone mad enough to lift a palm. On the timber stage she stands quiet, unshod, grimy, her wrists tied in front with fraying string. The sackcloth over her head is marked, too vast, tied close at the throat. Only her panting betrays her dread. It comes fast, thin, managed but barely. Her fingers jerk, grip, loosen. "She's no use to anyone if she won't even talk," the seller snarls. No one moves forward, not for a long space. Then the group splits like waves. From the rear, a high shape steps forward. Wide frame beneath a heavy coat, a face masked by the rim of a dark hat, aged but tidy. His soles are thick with clay, his tunic salt-stained, and his axe grip is bound in hide cord. A man who has dwelled more with pines than folks. $2, he says. Quiet descends like frost. The seller blinks. "You sure, Pilgrim?" "I spoke what I spoke." His tone is deep. Not cross, not keen, just firm. A few men jeer. "Must be lonely." The seller clears his pipes, wary now. "You do not want to see what you are taking." The man bends his head toward the girl, still frozen beneath the hood. "I ain't taking a face," he says softly. "I'm wedding a person." Even the breeze halts. No one mocks this time. "Name," the seller grunts. "Silas Boone." The trade. "Logger, Northridge." The seller writes. "Good. Let it be known that Mr. Silas Boone, dweller of Oregon Hills, has joined formal wedding pact under the gaze of God and the witness of this bench." He slides the leaf toward Silas, who signs without a blink. Then he turns to the girl. "You're now truly wed, gal. Speak your name for the book." The hood moves slightly. No noise at first. Then, very lightly, so lightly one has to bend forward to hear, the voice comes. "Annabelle Crow." Silas stalls. The group leans in. The seller lifts a brow, but says nothing. Silas's eyes grow, just a spark. Then they turn back, fixed on the hood, on the voice that now rings in his soul 3 winters ago, in the ice, in the gloom. A voice he never lost, a name he never knew until now. And suddenly the timber quiet, the crimson ice, the flame heat in that frozen hole, it all flows back. He moves off the stage slowly, grasps the girl limb, not roughly, not hastily, just surely enough to say, "You are guarded now." No one blocks them as they walk away. Not a breath from the group, just the groan of souls over wood and the murmur of a name that still shakes between them. Annabelle Crow. The timber closed in around them as they moved, the path thinning to a line of snapped pine needles and hard dirt. The light faded beneath the roof, sun filtering through the thick limbs like it too was unsure whether to draw near. Annabelle said nothing. The sackcloth still hid her head, tied close around her throat, the tails dancing in the night air. Once the gust grabbed it enough to pull aside, she reached up quickly, fixing it with both palms, keeping her face veiled. Silas Boone walked several yards ahead, pulling the old beast that held the few wares they had been given from the station. He did not look back, nor seek to talk. He simply held to the path, every so often peering toward the trees, as if sensing for more than wind. The quiet between them was not tense, it was a quiet shaped from different kinds of life. They found the shack before dark. It was made from dark fir, not big, but tight, tough, tidy, set against a hill of dirt that halted the worst of the north gale. There was a rock flue, a pile of wood beside the gate, and a pitted iron shoe fixed above the frame. Silas found the gate, moved it open with a groan, then stepped back. "You choose where you stay," he said softly. "No one's going to move you any more." Annabelle stepped in slowly. Her motions were wary but not frail. She did not shed the hood. Her steps made almost no noise across the flat timber floor. She did not rest at the board. She sat against the back wall, facing the room, palms resting on her shins, quiet. Silas stepped behind her, set a pile of kindling near the hearth, and began to tend at the hearth. No queries, no orders, only the steady noise of metal moving or water steaming. The smell came slowly, rich, thick, true, something with spice, stick of bark, the salt of cured pork. He toiled and beat as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Annabelle did not stir. When the stew was done, Silas set a timber dish near her. She flinched slightly but did not turn. He sat at the board with his own dish, neither moving nor looking. After several minutes, her voice came hidden but clear. "What is this?" Silas looked at his dish, stirred once, and said, "I call it the food for the last one standing." A beat, then a faint noise, almost a ghost of a grin, but held, pulled. He added, "Used to cook it for myself after long shifts in the pines. Then I started cooking 2 dishes, even when there was no one to eat the rest." She turned her head slightly, enough to peek sideways beneath the tail of the hood. On the seat beside him sat a second dish, matching, steam rising from it, no one else in the room. Silas pointed toward it. "I used to set it for my wife after the war, after the pines took more than they gave. Just a way to say I came back whole again." He paused. "Now I set it for you and for her." The quiet held. The logs popped. Annabelle reached for her dish slowly. Her palms shook faintly, but she held the tool and drew it under the sackcloth without shedding it. She ate in quiet, every bit small, timid, but she finished it. That night, while Silas cleaned the dishes in a tin pot near the hearth, Annabelle stayed by the wall, her shins drawn up, limbs wrapped around them, watching, not talking. But for the first time since he met her, she was not trembling. That night, after the logs had faded down to a red glow and the last traces of dinner had been cleared from the dishes, Silas sat alone before the grate. He had not struck a lamp. He did not need it. The log light was enough, throwing long ghosts that moved along the bark walls like silent ghosts. Outside, the gale cried through the pines, long, low, and known. He leaned forward, arms on shins, letting the heat touch his skin. But it was not heat he felt, not purely. It had been 3 years ago, a winter harder than any before, the kind of frost that turned fir needles into glass and breath into fire. He had gone too far north for logs. Hungry for wood, fixed with grit, he fell on a bank, broke his leg, and sank into a drift where no path stayed. By the time the frost hid his coat, he'd quit fighting. But then, palms hard, rough, a tug, hauling him. He recalled the ache, the heavy weight of his frame moving against stone, then haze. He woke to logs, a small hole hidden behind a wall of ice. The fire popped and sighed beside him, and the scent, something wild, sharp like boiled peel, filled his nose. Across from him sat a shape, a woman. Her face was masked beneath a sackcloth tied close, just like the one in the shack now. She wore coats of found wool and hide, boots sewn from bits. Her palms moved with skill as she poured a cup of hot broth into a tin mug. When she spoke, her tone was neither high nor low, only soft, steady, weary. "You do not need to know who I am," she said, "but I am not going to let you pass." He had sought to talk, but no words came. "Drink this," she went. "It is pine peel and dry moss. It will aid the heat." He recalled the flavor. Sharp, but he drank. She had bound his leg, set it against warm rocks, kept the logs burning through the dark. He faded in and out, fighting the cold, the ache, and whatever ghosts tried to take him away. When he woke again, dawn, light, cold, and hard, she was gone. Only the logs stayed, low and safe, and beside it, placed flat, was a bit of cloth, sewn, blue petals stitched in rough wire no larger than a palm. A gift, or perhaps a sign. He kept it, still held it, tucked inside his coat fold. And now in the shack behind him, a woman sat with the same tone, the same quiet palms, the same sackcloth over her face, and a name, Annabelle Crow. He shut his eyes, leaning closer into the heat. He did not need proof. He had felt it the second she had spoken on that auction stand. Not the name, the noise. The woman who had saved him had not wanted to be seen, not wanted to be known. And here she was again, still masked, still nameless to the world, but not to him. He did not tell her that night. He let the ghost live inside him, a silent bond between then and now. He looked back toward the small form tucked near the far wall, hood still on her head, back still turned. The same dread, the same need to vanish. But this time, Silas felt she was not alone, and that, perhaps, was the start of something that could last beyond frost. The timber held its breath that morning. Fog stayed low to the dirt, moving around the base of the pines like truths too shy to rise. A light gust went through the needles above, high and slow, as if even it did not want to break. Annabelle stepped outside the shack alone. She moved softly, arms tucked across her middle, and moved toward the tall fir that stood like a guard at the edge of the clearing. The hood still hid her head, but her steps no longer shook. Her back was firmer now, not bold, but no longer bent. At the base of the tree she sat. She turned her face slightly to where the early sun broke through the limbs. She reached up with shaking palms and eased the tie behind her throat. The hood moved up just far enough to let her inhale open face to the wind. Her lips, her nose, a piece of skin. It was not pride, it was a start. Silas saw her from the porch where he sat beside a timber pot, greasing the teeth of his blade. He did not stand, did not shout, but after a space he spoke low, firm, as if saying it more to the pines than to her. "I once got hurt bad. Deep frost. Got lost near Black Ridge. I should have died out there." His fingers moved over the iron, rubbing. "But someone found me, pulled me into a hole, saved my life." Annabelle did not turn. She wore a hood over her head, would not speak her name, barely let him see her palms. He paused. "But I recall her voice." He turned his head just slightly, not to face her fully, but to let his words drift clearer. "Your voice sounds just like hers." There was a quiet, and then a noise, the soft rub of cloth moving over skin. He did not stir, not even when he felt her gaze on him. When he finally looked up, she was peering straight at him. The hood lay in her lap. Her face was not broken, it was not grim, it was human, but it held a mark no one could miss. A long, thin scar went from her right brow to just above the line of her chin. Not new, not red, but deep, lasting, as though claws, hard and wild, had sought to tear something from her that would not come loose. She held his stare, no longer veiled, but not bold either, only bare. Her voice came in a breath. "The man who kept the boarding house where I toiled, he told me I could stay a room if I gave more," she panted. "I said no. He did not like that." She looked down for a pulse, then back to Silas. He came at me. I fought back, shoved him. He tripped. His head struck the hearth. She looked past him now, into ghost. He died. I ran. Silas's mouth clamped, but he said nothing. "They said I killed him by choice, that I trapped him, that it was all staged." Her voice broke. There were no witnesses. No one trusted me. She looked at her own palms. They called me a liar, a flirt, a killer. Silas stood, rubbing his palms on a rag. Annabelle went on, her tone low and flat. They sold me off to pay his bills, sent me along from one hand to another like cows. They hid my face to make it easy, to make me zero. She looked at the hood in her lap. I wore this so folks would not look at me like I was rot, so they would not see the mark and judge what I was worth before I even spoke. She looked up at him again, eyes wet but hard. I did not ask to be saved. I did not ask to be bought, but I am weary of hiding. Silas did not move forward. He did not touch her. He only bowed. "Thank you," he said, "for telling me." His tone was firm, warm, true. You did not have to, but you did. She blinked hard, but no tears fell, only breath. And in that breath something moved. For the first time since she came, she was not a ghost. She was a woman with a name, a tale, and a face, and Silas had seen all three and turned away from none. The sun moved slowly through the pines the next morning, its light, bright and soft, pouring through the thin pane above the board. Dust motes turned slowly in the ray, like tiny souls dancing between the timber walls, blessing the calm. Inside the shack, the air was still, not of dread, not any more, but of the hush of knowing, like breath held in space after something thin has been shared and carefully taken. Annabelle had barely spoken since the day before, but she had not grabbed for the hood. She no longer pulled it over her head before resting, no longer kept it placed at the foot of her bed like a buckler waiting for war. Her hair, loose and messy from sleep, lay softly against her neck as she rose from the cot. Her steps stayed wary, her frame guarded, but something in her air had shifted, something small, like the soil melting beneath frost. She blinked at the light pouring through the pane and moved toward the board, waiting for the same, a tin of beans, the timber dish she cleaned nightly, the lone spoon. Instead, she halted short. There was something new waiting for her, a small glass. It stood straight, silver-rimmed, old at the sides but rubbed to shine. It leaned against a flat block of pine, set perfectly to grab the light of the rising sun so that it would glow, not expose. Beside it sat a wrap, sea-blue silk, worn slightly in spots, but soft and carefully placed, like it had been loved once, maybe still was. There was no word, no sign pointing toward it, just the glass and the wrap, set there as if they had always belonged to that board, and as if she had always been meant to find them. Annabelle looked at the things for a long time. She did not move, not at first. The logs in the hearth had gone low, and only the snapping of old pine and the steady groan of the beams overhead filled the room. Outside, the timber began to wake, the call of a jaybird in the limbs, the slow drop of dew from the eaves. She came to the table slowly, as if scared the glass might show something she could not take. But when she reached it, she looked. What she saw was not new. She had felt her face 100 times since the day her life broke open. She knew the lines of the scar, the track it made down her skin like a brand that never asked leave. Her palm lifted. She touched the mark softly, the way one might touch a name cut into rock. Known, faded. But this time under the sun, through clean glass, she did not hide. The scar was still there, it always would be, but so was the woman behind it. Her stare stayed, then moved to the wrap. She lifted it with both palms. It slid through her fingers like brook water, cold, soft, kind. There was care sewn into every thread. She brought it to her head, not to hide the scar, but to shape what others would see, to calm the line, to take rule of her own look, not out of guilt, but of choice. The wrap stayed into place like it belonged there. In the glass, a new form came, not the chaste girl from the sail, not the ghost from the frost storm, but a woman, whole, tall, still holding what she had lived through, but no longer lost by it. Behind her came a noise, soft soles on timber. She did not turn. She did not need to. Silas stood in the door, one frame leaning against the wood. He had come in without a word, as was his path, but the look on his face was not one of wariness or shock. It was quiet respect. He tilted his chin toward the wrap. "That used to be my wife's," he said, tone firm. "She wore it whenever she needed to feel like herself again." Annabelle's fingers touched the silk near her brow. "I thought maybe it would fit you, too," he added. She turned slightly towards him, not flinching, not shielding. He held her stare steady. Then, with a tone as soft as moss and just as firm, he said, "Anyone who seeks to make you ashamed of what you lived through is blind." A beat passed, and the blind do not get to judge beauty. Her throat locked. The tears came slow, but they came. Not hard, not frantic, but warm, clean. She looked at herself again. Then softly she reached out and laid her palm flat against the glass, meeting her ghost halfway. And for the first time in a very long time, Annabelle Crow let herself be seen. The peace they had made in the pines did not last untested. It never did, not in these lands. Fear came on horse, riding alone beneath a sky marked with storm light. The man was thin, long-limbed, his coat torn from path gale and mean miles. His eyes gray, keen, cold, cut through the crowd like a knife through fresh hide. He called himself Tracker, and Tracker was no wanderer. He was a man-hunter, the kind who could read dirt like holy book and smell truths under soles. Word had drifted from the south path, a girl with a mark, hiding in the hills, face once veiled, now showing. Someone hinted she had blood on her palms and a woodsman for a shield. Tracker listened, and then he rode. By the time he found the timber camp near North Ridge, he was asking too many queries. He acted as a lost pilgrim, said he was seeking work with the loggers, said he heard talk of a man named Boone who lived deep in the pines. Silas met him by luck near the tool shed. One look, and he knew. Not by the words. Tracker was civil, steady, but the way he looked at the line, the quiet in his frame, it was the quiet of a viper just before the strike. Later that night, Silas came back to the shack. His face was harder than the gale. "He is seeking you," he said poorly. Annabelle did not speak at first. She stood by the hearth, moving broth that had gone thin with ghost. Her eyes were firm, but far away. Then, without a word, she moved the room, opened the timber box at the foot of the cot, and pulled out the old hood, flat, untouched since the morning she had left it. She held it in her palms for a long time. "I will wear it again," she said softly. "One more time." Silas looked at her. "You do not have to." Her eyes met him. "This time, I pick it, not for guilt, for plan." They made the move together that night. Annabelle would ride east through the old burned road. Wearing the hood, Tracker would trail. He would not avoid a girl alone, marked and veiled, a ghost back. Silas would take the high pass, ride across, and meet with the law in town. If the plan held, Tracker would trail her straight into the net. And it did. At dawn, with the sky barely pink, Annabelle took Silas's second horse and rode out, hood tight over her head, pulse pounding. She did not shake this time. She looked ahead. By nightfall, Tracker had taken the hook. He followed her deep into the eastern stones, where Silas stayed with the law and 2 men from the Ridge team. Tracker drew first, but not fast enough. He was disarmed, tied, and flung over the back of his own horse, charged with illegal hunt, attempted harm, and intent to kill. Annabelle watched it all from the peak, her shape still hidden beneath the hood. Only once he was gone did she ride down. When she found Silas, he moved forward to help her down from the horse. She let him. Then, slowly, she reached up and untied the knot at the base of her throat.
The hood moved free. She folded it once, twice, then held it in both palms, staring at the cloth. Silas watched her, unsure of what she would do. She looked up at him, her face quiet but no longer scared. "It saved me one last time," she said, "not because it hid me, but because I used it." He bowed. "Then what will you do with it now?" She looked at the pines, at the fading path, at the world she had once moved through like a ghost. She folded the hood one more time and tucked it beneath her arm. "I will keep it," she said softly, "not as a cage, but as proof." Silas raised a brow. "Proof of what?" She smiled. "That even what was once my cell can become my shield if I pick it to be." And for the first time there was light in her tone. Not the light of mirth, but the light of a woman who had lived through the gloom and now could name it.
It was midday when the sound came. A slow, unsure knock. Not the kind of knock that ordered open, but the kind that sought leave. Silas opened the shack gate to find a woman standing on the porch. Her gown was old, path soiled, and her boots held the red grit of long trails. Her skin was dark, her frame straight, her eyes wary but soft. She held her hat in both palms. "Name's Mavis. Mavis Green," she said. "I used to work at the Ridley place, stove help, cook mostly." Behind Silas, Annabelle stepped into the frame. She stoled when she saw the woman. Mavis took a step back, then stopped herself. "I heard you were up this way," she said softly, "and I figured it was time I stopped being a faint-heart." The wind sighed through the firs as quiet grew between them. "I saw what happened that night," Mavis said. "Saw him pull you into that back room, heard you yell, heard the smash, but I did not speak up. I needed the task. I needed to eat." Annabelle's fingers clenched against the gatewood. "I am not proud of that," Mavis went, "but I can make it right now if you'll let me." Later, over tea at the board, Mavis told everything, facts only someone who had truly been there could know. She noted the marks, the blood, the quiet that stayed. "I should have told it back then," she breathed, "but I will tell it now. You were speaking the truth." With Silas's aid, they wrote it all down. Mavis signed the paper in strong, careful hand. The note was closed and sent to the nearest law post by horse runner. Weeks went. The timber grew greener. The sky turned warmer. Then one morning, the law rode up with a single letter in hand. Silas opened it on the porch, read it twice before walking it inside. Annabelle took it in her palms. The words were few. Charges against Annabelle Crow dropped. Case shut. Order revoked. She read them again and again. Then she walked outside, past the woodpile, past the horses, and down to the tree line. She found the old pine, the one she had once hidden her hood beneath. She sat at its base, moving her fingers through the moss, breathing. She did not sob. She did not laugh. She just shut her eyes. And in a voice barely more than air, she said, "For the first time in my life, I do not have to fly." Justice had come, not with horns, not with cheers, only with truth and the quiet grit of someone who had finally picked to stand aside it. Spring came softly to the ridge. The pines, once bare and cold, now wore thin buds like vows waiting to bloom. Fog still moved in at dawn, but it was thinner, paler, as though even the haze had grown weary of hiding. Birds sang again. The brook moved with goal. The timber felt kind. Silas had been busy. With spare logs and a quiet kind of care, he built a modest roof just outside the shack, near the edge, where wild stems began to take the grass. It was nothing big. 4 tall beams, a simple arch draped in cloth, but it stood tough like him. They asked only a few. Mavis came, grinning wide in a gown that did not match but still fit her soul. The old smith from town brought a jug of fruit brandy. The clerk's wife held a crate of bread and a bunch of mountain lavender. They were not many, but they were enough. Inside the shack, Annabelle stood before the small glass Silas had left for her months ago. Her gown was plain cloth, hand-sewn, the shade of milk, but it fit her truly because she had made it herself, with firm fingers and quiet nights. On her head she wore a lace. It was made from the hood, the same one that had once hid her shame, her dread, her name. But now it was something else. Silas had cleaned it, sun-aired it, and cut it with care. The sides were sewn with white cord, the kind used for fixing old cloth, and on the edges, sewn in faint blue, were tiny wild stems, almost matching to the ones stitched into the cloth she had once left behind in the frost. When she stepped out of the shack, the pines fell still. Silas stood beneath the timber arch, palms folded, heart full. He had trimmed his hair, rubbed his soles, and ironed the only tunic he owned without sap marks, but none of that mattered when he saw her. She moved slowly, like the soil had finally given her leave to be seen, and she was lovely, not because the lace hid the mark, but because she had picked to wear it again on her terms. As she reached him, Silas took her palms. His tone was low, but every word was firm. "No matter what hid your face," he said, "you were always the woman I picked from the start." He paused, looking into her eyes. "And now you are the woman I vow to stand beside to the end." Annabelle grinned, not with the wariness of someone who had been hurt, but with the calm of someone who had finally healed. He breathed, "And I vow the same." There was no monk, no vows read from books, just them and the pines and the folks who mattered most. And when they kissed, soft and sure, the wind moved just enough to rustle the cloth overhead. A few drops of dew fell, light as breath. Mavis leaned close to the smith and said, "Not quite usual. Never thought I'd see a burlap hood turned into a wedding lace." Then, after a beat, she added, "Never thought it could be so damn lovely." The smith laughed. "It ain't the hood," he said. "It's what she turned it into." Later that night, as the logs popped and mirth mixed with birdsong, Annabelle sat beside Silas on the porch. The lace lay folded in her lap. She ran her fingers across the sewn edge. "Odd," she said. "This thing used to mean everything I feared." He looked over. "And now?" She smiled. "Now it means everything I picked." Silas bobbed. He reached over, locking his fingers through hers. They sat that way until the stars came out, and the timber, once their cell, now held them like home.